Coming up on Arirang News, North Korea conducts yet another round of missile launches. This time it fires several cruise missiles off its east coast while South Korea and the U.S. stage major joint military exercises. South Korea's parliamentary committee today passes a bill that expands tax incentives for firms investing in chips and other national strategic technology. This to help local firms get ahead in the fierce global chip battlefield. After a year-and-a-half investigation, South Korea's prosecutors indict main opposition Democratic Party chairman Lee Jae-myung over his allegations of bribery and corruption involving millions of dollars. This comes amid power struggles within the Democratic Party while Lee denies all allegations. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. News on North Korea is where we start today. Just 3 days after testing a short-range ballistic missile, Pyongyang launched more missiles towards waters off its east coast in an apparent protest against the joint drills between Seoul and Washington. Sources say the missiles are likely to be the regime's version of Tomahawk, a type of long-range strategic cruise missile. Kim Mo-kyung leads our coverage tonight.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says that North Korea begun firing several cruise missiles from its Hamhung area at around 10:15 a.m. on Wednesday. Authorities are analyzing further details, while sources say there were likely long-range strategic cruise missiles, also known as the North's version of Washington's Tomahawk. Wednesday's launch comes amid Seoul and Washington's combined Freedom Shield exercise, as well as the concurrent field training exercise called the Warrior Shield. The launches are seen as an act of protest by the North. Following the launch, Seoul's military said through a press release that it will successfully wrap up the Freedom Shield and continue to carry out the Warrior Shield in a high-intensity manner. It also added that the military has been on close watch of the regime and its movements, though they cannot reveal all the details. The latest launch also comes just 3 days after North Korea fired a short-range ballistic missile into the East Sea during what it claimed to be tactical nuclear counterattack drills. Pundits are now on the watch for further provocative actions from Pyongyang as the joint 11-day Freedom Shield exercise is set to end on Thursday. Kim Mo-kyung, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to chips industry, South Korea's parliamentary committee today passes a bill to give more tax incentives to companies making investments for chips and in other strategic industries as well. This is to help local companies get ahead in the global chip battlefield. South Korea could soon be able to expand tax benefits for chip-making conglomerates to a maximum of 25%. The Parliamentary Strategy and Finance Committee on Wednesday passed a bill revising the tax code to provide higher tax incentives for firms investing in the semiconductor industry and other strategic sectors, known as the K-CHIPS Act.
We have agreed on the K-CHIPS Act. South Korea can now get ahead in the global chips battlefield.
The tax credit for conglomerates investing in chip facilities will be almost doubled from the current 8% to 15%. Also, for small and medium-sized companies, the credit will be raised sharply from the current 16% to 25%. Including the additional 10% tax credit to be applied this year for increased investments in strategic technology, conglomerates will be getting a tax credit of up to 25%, and small and medium companies will be getting up to 35%. Investment in other national strategic industries, including secondary cell batteries, displays, and vaccines, are also subject to tax incentives.
High-tech designated by the presidential order, such as hydrogen and future mobility, are also included.
The bill will be submitted to the Judiciary Committee, and once approved, it'll likely be put up for a final vote at a plenary session next Thursday. Follow-up measures to mend economic ties between Seoul and Tokyo pick up speed as Japan is expected to conclude procedures to lift its export restrictions on South Korea as early as Thursday. And the same goes for other entangled issues in the near future, like the trade whitelist. Our Lee Soo-jin has the details.
Economic relations between South Korea and Japan are on the mend. Industry Minister Lee Jae-myung announced on Wednesday that the procedure is expected to be concluded this week for Japan to lift its export bans and for Korea to withdraw the complaint filed with the World Trade Organization in response. In 2019, Japan imposed restrictions on the exporting to Korea of 3 crucial semiconductor components, hydrogen fluoride, fluorinated polyamide, and EUV photoresist, in retaliation to a Korean Supreme Court ruling ordering Japanese companies to compensate victims of wartime forced labor. The same year, Japan went on to drop South Korea from its export whitelist of countries that are allowed expedited export procedures. South Korea responded by also removing Japan from its own whitelist. The country will now begin the procedure to add Japan back to its list of preferential trade partner countries sometime this week. In response to potential concerns about Korea starting the whitelist reinstatement process before Japan, the industry minister said that focusing on who makes the first move is irrelevant, given what benefits mended economic relations could bring to both nations. He also added that the process could take less than 2 months, as it usually would. This comes on the heels of a rare bilateral summit held in Tokyo last week between South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Seoul is expecting the warmer ties to boost business relations and investments between the two countries, as well as help both nations strengthen their supply chains. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Due to higher prices, eating out has become more burdensome for some students and office workers here in Korea. As our Lee Jae-myung reports, affordable meals and smaller food portions are emerging as money-saving options.
It's only 7:40 in the morning, but students are lining up in front of this cafeteria. They are here for a so-called 1001 breakfast. Starting last week, one university in Seoul is offering students low-priced meals in the morning at a cost of around 77 cents. The same meal used to cost 4,001 or just a little over $3. Only 130 meals are prepared per day and given out on a first-come, first-served basis.
I used to skip breakfast, but now I've started to have it again because it's cheap.
I think this is great and hope it goes on longer so that many students can enjoy it.
One official from the student office says it's planning to expand the project as the meal line is getting longer every day.
We found that many students skip breakfast because of the burden of high prices. That's when we decided to participate in the 1001 breakfast project with financial support from the government.
According to Statistics Korea, prices for dining out last year hit their highest in 30 years. The younger generation, especially those who live alone, have had to deal with worrying inflation over the past year. Products in smaller sizes and with lower prices are helping them to lessen the burden.
For people who live alone and want a smaller proportion for a lower price, here's also a half serving of tteokbokki. Not only at an affordable price, but people say it could also reduce food waste.
It was hard for me to finish up all the food by myself, so for me, I would love to have half-serving tteokbokki at an affordable price of 3,000 won.
Amid the soaring prices for dining out, these trends are expected to expand further as more young people are making greater efforts to tighten their purse strings. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Starting this year, COVID-19 vaccines will be administered just once between October and November, just like the seasonal flu vaccines. This year, they'll be offered for free. This is according to Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong during a COVID-19 meeting on Wednesday. Meanwhile, people with weakened immune systems will be vaccinated twice in spring and fall. High-risk groups, including senior citizens aged 65 or older, and those working in nursing facilities are highly advised to get vaccinated. The vaccination program is subjected to be adjusted should there be a sharp rise in deaths or serious cases caused by a new variant. Korea continues to see a concerning demographic portrait. Findings for January show a record high loss of lives, surpassing a record low in new births, prompting a further natural decrease in the national population. Moon Hae-ryun has more.
South Korea this year saw the lowest number of births and the highest number of deaths for the month of January, since data was first compiled in the early 1980s. Data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday show the number of births dropped from over 24,000 in January 2022 to just over 23,000 this year, a 6% decrease on year. Meanwhile, the number of deaths rose by 9.6% on year. With over 32,000 deaths recorded in January, the natural change, calculated by subtracting the number of deaths from the number of births, came to a decline in the population of some 9,000. However, the figures were more optimistic when compared with December last year. The number of births rose nearly 38% on month, and the number of deaths fell by nearly 2%. The birth rate in the past few years has generally been a bit higher in the first half of the year than in the second half. With the easing of COVID-19 restrictions last year, the number of registered marriages rose for 4 months in a row in the second half of last year. This streak ended with a drop in the number of marriages on month in January, falling from nearly 20,000 to 17,926. But compared to January 2022, the number of marriages went up by 21.5% on year. The number of births hit an all-time low last year, falling below the 250,000 mark, but this increase in the number of marriages is expected to have a positive impact on birth rates ahead. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's prosecution has indicted opposition leader Lee Jae-myung on charges of corruption. This comes amid brewing turmoil within the Democratic Party for quite some time now, with some members saying Lee's personal risks should not be carried over to the party, while others insist on his innocence. The party has decided, though, that Lee will not be suspended from his post. Our National Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo reports.
18 months of investigation led South Korea's prosecution on Wednesday to indict without detention Democratic Party of Korea chairman Lee Jae-myung on allegations of corruption.
The indictment had already been determined. It's not a surprise at all. Now it's time for the court to make a decision.
The opposition leaders mainly accused of having used his former position as mayor of Seongnam City to grant favors to property developers so they could pocket at the current exchange rate some $600 million in illegal proceeds for the Daejangdong redevelopment project. Prosecutors say that led the city government to suffer some $370 million in financial damages. He's also linked to a third-party bribery case involving Seongnam Football Club in the mid-2010s. Lee has denied all the allegations, instead accusing the Yoon Suk-yeol administration of orchestrating the probes to take him down. The ruling People Power Party, meanwhile, has cast doubt on the Democratic Party's future with Lee Jae-myung as its chair, hinting that the suspicions surrounding him go beyond the Daejangdong scandal.
I don't think Lee can serve as the Democratic Party's leader any longer. Further investigations and indictments are inevitable.
This follows the National Assembly's narrow rejection back in late February of a motion seeking parliamentary consent for Lee's arrest. The prosecution's earlier request for an arrest warrant was the first time in the nation's constitutional history that such a warrant had been sought for the sitting leader of a main opposition party. Meanwhile, in response to Lee's indictment, the Democratic Party held a Party Affairs Committee meeting where it decided he will maintain his post. Citing political repression, it concluded that Article 80 of the party charter, which can suspend those indicted on corruption charges from their duties, will not apply to E. Last year, the party had revised the article to allow one to be exempted from suspension if their indictment is determined to be politically charged or unjust. 한성우, Arirang News.
In Moscow, Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin meet and strengthen their ties, apparently against the West. In the meantime, the U.S. and NATO demand Beijing play a constructive role to help end the war in Ukraine. Choi Min-jung has more.
Russia and China said in a joint declaration on Tuesday that their bilateral relationship has reached its highest level ever. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping at the Kremlin, where the two leaders called for the need to settle the Ukraine crisis through a peace settlement. Putin praised China's plan, which calls for a ceasefire and talks with no mention of withdrawing Russian troops from Ukraine, and claimed that it can be taken as the basis for a peaceful settlement when the West and Kyiv are ready. Xi, meanwhile, barely mentioned Ukraine, instead said China had an impartial position. However, the White House questioned that claim and urged China to pressure Russia to withdraw its troops.
So now if China wants to play a constructive role here in this conflict, then they ought to press Russia to pull its troops out of Ukraine and Ukrainian sovereign territory. They should urge President Putin to cease bombing cities, hospitals, and schools, to stop the war crimes and the atrocities, and end the war today.
Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on Tuesday warned China against providing arms support to Russia.
So first, we haven't seen any proof that China is delivering lethal weapons to Russia. But we have seen some signs that this has been a request from Russia, and that this is an issue that is considered in Beijing.
One expert says the war in Ukraine is pulling Russia and China together because they are forming a united front against their common enemy, the United States.
But that said, I really don't think China wants escalation in the Ukrainian war, because what China still wants is peaceful environment so that they can concentrate more on economic development, which is their priority, particularly when Xi Jinping was able to secure his third term as the president of China.
He added that Beijing is unlikely to support Moscow if it escalates the war by using nuclear weapons, as it will only destabilize China's efforts to revive its economy. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And with Chinese President Xi Jinping visiting Russia, another strategic foreign visit took place on the other side of the Ukraine conflict. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida made a surprise visit to Kyiv on Tuesday for talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The PM pledged to deliver $470 million worth of new aid for the energy sector and some $30 million through NATO funds for non-lethal equipment. Also, with Japan set to host the G7 summit in May, the PM invited Zelensky, to which the Ukrainian leader replied he would take part virtually. The visit by Kishida, the last G7 leader to visit Ukraine, comes amid growing domestic pressure to make the trip. He becomes Japan's first post-war leader to enter a war zone since World War II. In light of World Water Day, the United Nations is holding the UN Water Conference for the first time in 46 years. The three-day event will take place at the UN headquarters in New York from Wednesday. The conference is expected to adopt the Water Action Agenda, which includes voluntary commitments of countries and stakeholders to accomplish the UN's Sustainable Development Goal number 6, that is to provide clean water and sanitation for all by 2030. Leading the South Korean delegation will be Environment Minister Han Hwa-jin, who will be giving a keynote speech at Thursday's plenary session. The meeting is held on the halfway point of the UN's Water Action Decade, which is from 2018 to 2028. Today, March 22nd, is World Water Day, as designated by the United Nations, with an inaugural celebration 30 years ago. Our Song Yu-jin shares with us the importance of this particular designation, as millions continue to lack safe water to drink, let alone to wash.
Water is life. It makes up almost 70% of our bodies. But it's not just about staying hydrated and healthy. Water is also essential for energy, food production, and healthy ecosystems. In 2015, the world set an ambitious goal to provide everyone with clean water and sanitation by 2030. With less than a decade to go, we're still facing a dire shortage in terms of both quantity and quality. As of 2021, 2 billion people lacked access to safe drinking water, and 1.4 million die every year due to poor water quality.
The problems are related to decades of misuse and also poor management and over-extraction of groundwater and contamination of freshwater resources. And if you think about the current mega trends of urbanization, population growth, and also industrialization, and together with now natural cause, for example, climate change, those are now making things even worse.
As for South Korea, hygiene is not an issue, but the amount of water available is a problem.
We're grappling with severe drought except for during the monsoon season. The amount of rain per day has not changed significantly, but we're seeing fewer rainy days.
Then, what can we do about this water crisis?
We don't need to have more technologies more. Perhaps we need to pay more attention to how the people, they think about the water issues more fundamentally, and how to also to change their consumption behaviors and also the industrial restructuring in terms of using less water.
The government should devise ways to educate people of the importance of conserving and managing water.
But it's not just up to governments. We can all play a part in our daily lives. And because 90% of power generation is water intensive, you can start by turning off unused devices while you sleep. Shop sustainably, buy food you'll actually eat. That's because reducing food waste reduces demand on agriculture, one of the biggest consumers of water. For example, it takes about 3,000 to 5,000 liters of water to make up 1 kilogram of rice. Finally, share your efforts on social media with the hashtag World Water Day. Generate debates, raise awareness, and inspire others to take action. Be the change you want to see in the world. 송유진, Arirang News.
K-pop boyband TXT, or Tomorrow by Together, will this August headline 2023 Lollapalooza, an annual global music festival in Chicago. The 5-member boyband, which is part of the same agency as BTS, will take part in the 4-day event from August 3rd. This marks the second time that a HYBE artist will headline the event, following BTS member J-Hope's performance in 2022. The role is significant, as it's usually given to the most notable or prominent artists. This year, a total of 7 famous musicians will headline the festival, including American rapper Kendrick Lamar and American singer-songwriter Billie Eilish. Some 170 artists will be performing, including K-pop girl band New Jeans.
Unseasonable heat prevailed in South Korea, with readings close to what we see in early summer. This unseasonable heat will start to taper off tomorrow daytime. Although temperatures will exceed the seasonal average, conditions will be a tad cooler at 21 degrees Celsius. But the unstable air will bring nationwide showers tomorrow. Rain will start overnight and will continue until tomorrow afternoon. Rain clouds are heavily clustered across the south of the country. Jeju Island will see the most amount of rainfall, with up to 50 millimeters in the forecast. Inland regions including Chungcheongdo, Jeollado, and Gyeongsangdo provinces will see 5 to 30. The Seoul metropolitan area will see relatively less, with about 5 millimeters in the forecast. Rainy spells will dominate for the morning hours. As for the readings, Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at 13 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 21 degrees, Daejeon 17, Daegu and Busan will be reaching 18 degrees Celsius. For Jeju Island, showers will continue until this Friday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for tonight's newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news. Good night.